This
We
conference will
can't hear
now be
you.
recorded.
Can you hear me now?
It's,
Can
can
anyone
you
hear
hear?
me?
Okay. All right.
Angela, I think
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
but finance
yes.
We can hear you,
secretary is.
Angela.
Okay, so Carrie, maybe it's your system that's the
Yeah.
issue. Maybe you got to turn up the volume, or whoever said they couldn't hear me.
Go ahead.
Okay, we will call to order the Public Safety, Health and Welfare Committee meeting this evening at 6:36 p.m. If I forget someone or if I don't see you, please speak up. Present are Council President Broussard, um, Councilman Scarl, Madden, Heeman, Glassburn, Limpert, Gilchrist, Special Assistant to the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director / Clerk, and our Economic Development Director. On the agenda this evening, we'll just begin with Resolution 2023-149, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the purchase of 50 everyday level 3 ICW armor plates from Dayton Armor LLC in the amount of $42,690 for the purpose of modernizing the bulletproof vests utilized by patrol and SWAT officers within the Division of Police and declaring an emergency. Who would like to speak to this?
Madam Chairwoman, I'll begin the discussion as Director Schofield is out sick today. As you mentioned, this is to purchase 50 of the level 3 armor plates, which will then be inserted into our bulletproof vests. The cost is $42,690. 50% of that will be reimbursed through the Federal Burn Memorial Bulletproof Vest Program, which the city receives every year to replace vests. As this is a health and safety issue for our police officers, we are asking for this to be passed on suspension at your next meeting next Wednesday. And we do have Officer Petro here to provide additional information and answer questions. Again, as Director Schofield is out sick this evening, Madam Chairwoman, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The immediate purchase, I'm assuming, so we can keep the same price as well.
Yes, Madam
So
Chairwoman.
Okay, and these vests are the current vests that the officers are using are fitted for this type of addition to them.
they are.
Okay.
The what these are, this in conjunction with, means that these plates are designed to fit with soft armor, which our officers currently have. The vests, the outer carriers, I should say, that we've adopted here in the city of North Olmsted provide pockets for these armored plates to fit into both front and back.
So do they have two plates in the front and one in the back?
No. So what
Or
it
is it?
is we've got soft. You guys can see. So we've got soft armor. This is what our officers carry every single day. What these plates are, and this is the exact one that we're going to be purchasing here, are hard armor plates. They're approximately a pound, and there's going to be one for the front and one for the back.
So will sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. Ask any questions.
How flexible are they for movement?
They are not.
Okay, so will they crack if you hit them a certain way, or are these pretty sturdy?
No. Great question. I'm glad you asked. So what we've went through is a company called Dayton Armor. And what I can say about Dayton Armor is they have refined the process of which they make hard armor plates, where a new way to do this is with polymer. So these plates are polymer. They do not crack. The older plates, the older hard armor style plates that used to be in service with a lot of police departments, Department of Defense, is ceramic. And the ceramic ones are the ones that'll crack, that you have to x-ray and you have to be careful with. With these polymers, that's not the case for the way that it's made, the material that it's made out of.
Thank you. Are there any
The
questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I just want to take the time to say, I really do appreciate the time to be able to speak and kind of get some more information out there on why these are, important, and the opportunity to purchase these for our safety forces, for our police officers is uh, recently with our officer involved shooting, we can tell our officer was shot in the chest and the soft armor had stopped it. But the way that soft armor works is that the round, which we'll say is about the size of my pen here, strikes the soft armor, and the way that it stops the round is kind of like a baseball mitt, where it pulls from all the remaining corners of this soft armor and comes in. It creates a deformation on the backside. Okay, so we have a lot of velocity of that round, which is about this size in one small area. And in our officer's case, it created a very large crater actually in his chest, and blunt force trauma to his chest. With the hard armor plates, not only will these protect our officers for a larger round, if you will, it also disperses the energy. So now the deformation as it comes through, we'll still get that on the backside, but instead of pulling from all the corners, it displaces the energy across the panel. So if it's a pistol round, the deformation will be extremely minimal on the backside, i.e. that blunt force trauma, and it'll be spread across this hard plate.
Thank you, officer. And then I'm assuming once, let's hope those shields are never used, but in the event of another shooting, I mean, I'm assuming those would need to be replaced afterward, right? Just like the vests do after
Correct,
they've
yes.
been damaged. Okay.
Yes, and these ones are just ratification. They're multi-hit, so it's not just a one round and then it'll stop protecting our officers, in that moment. These are rated to take multiple rounds to protect that officer in that crisis event.
Now, the vest that you spoke of before with the most recent officer involved shooting,
Yes,
if that officer had been struck again, would that vest have worked or not?
absolutely. Yes,
Okay, so even though it buckles inward, it still has the protection there?
correct. It
Okay.
does. That just again, we just talk about that blunt force trauma to the officer, and then depending on the caliber of the round, the type of round, we also have to look at the blunt force trauma where it impacts the officer in the chest for the internal organs underneath.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions from committee? Mr. Madden?
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman. Um, My one question is concerning the actual wording of the resolution. I noticed in the wording for the resolution up above, it's showing quantity of 50 to be purchased. And then in the section 1 below, it's referring to 50 sets of plates. I don't know if that needs to be clarified or if the wording is adequate as it is.
We just I couldn't speak on the wording, but for an order, would be for 50 sets since we're providing officers front
Right.
and back plates, so it'll come in a set. There are two different cuts. They call them a shooter cut and a sappy cut, but that's just the actual shape of the plates, so you buy them in sets.
Yes, and Madam Chairwoman, I would just say, and obviously Director Garreau can correct me if I'm wrong, but so the word sets was left out of the title of the resolution that was read, but it is clearly stated in section 150 sets.
Would it be beneficial to amend the heading just to include the 50 sets? Director Garreau, your volume is not working. Or your speaker or microphone. Sorry. Yes,
Actually,
amended. Yes,
since you're not a
no.
member of council, you can also give us a chat,
He
instruction
said
if you need.
no. Okay. Now, will the purchase of 50 sets be enough? Is there a plan to have any additional on station?
So the 50 sets will be enough to cover our officers. We also have a couple of sets that will be available in the event we need to replace. Oh, and as we continue to hire to our full staffing level, we've accounted for that. These plates will also be the city of North Olmsted, so they won't go to the individual officer. They'll be issued to the officer, similar to the initial issue gear that an officer receives when he is first hired onto the police department. And what that means then is if we have an officer that retires or leaves, we will retain these plates, and then we will reissue them to additional new hire officers.
Okay. And then the turnaround time to replace these, do we know what that is in the event that there isn't enough on station?
So the turnaround time, there's a lead time. And the longest that the owner who I'm in contact with said would be 6 weeks. However, Dayton Armor is local. They are Ohio. And something we can work out is he's traveled up here for the West Shore Enforcement Bureau SWAT team. And we can, if need be on a onesie or twosie basis, I'm sure, try to make liaison with each other to coordinate at least one plate replacement.
Okay. Thank you, officer. Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, then I will, sorry, I lost my agenda here. I'll make a motion to recommend approval to all of council and ask for a second.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councilman Madden. All in favor say aye. Aye.
I
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes with a vote of 3-0. And the last item on the agenda, I know we were going to discuss the deer culling. Mayor, will you be speaking to that as well?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, and again, Officer Petro and Detective Richards are also with us this evening to add additional information and then answer any questions that council may have about the deer culling program.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so the deer culling program has been happening in the city of North Olmsted since 2014. The city received tags from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for 100 deer in 2024. That is the same amount of tags that we received last year in 2023. And we had 100 tags, and then the program decreased the number of deer by 86. So that was this past year in 23. And in years past, the first or second neighbors on each side of property where calling would be taking place would be notified. This past year, I had requested that the number of people that are to be notified is up to 5 residents on each side of the calling property to be notified. Calling is to protect residents and for the health and safety of the deer population. Overcrowding of deer actually harm the population and can lead to an increase in traffic accidents and other issues. ODNR asks the city to do a survey every year. What we found out was the last time that our city had done a survey was in 2014. So we weren't sure why it hadn't been done in the intervening years, but obviously one was done this past year and one will be done every year per ODNR's request. So the survey that we posted this year was posted in October 23rd of 2023, and it was on our website until November 15th of 2023. And then again, Madam Chairwoman, you requested that the survey be put up a second time. So that survey then stayed on our website from the 20th through the 27th of this year. And you and Councilman Lippert had also made a request for us to look into. There was 2 questions that people who had filled out the survey, they said that there was not a choice in either one of those for a not applicable. So once that concern was raised, the city worked with our web person, and the not applicable choice was added to both of those questions. Prior to the survey closing the first time, 64 people responded with not applicable to one of the questions, and 207 responded not applicable to the other. So it was, that correction was made in time for us to register results. And the survey results from the original survey were sent to council last week, and then the updated results from the additional 13 people who took the survey in the past week have been added in and were sent to City Council today. A total of 352 people responded to the survey. Council could see from the original survey, the answers to the 2 most important questions are essentially the same, even after reposting the survey. So those were, how would you describe the deer population in North Olmsted over the last 5 years? Do you want it to remain the same, increase, or decrease? So in response to what you would like to see the deer population in North Olmsted do, the results changed from 60% saying decreased, 35% saying remain stable, and 6% saying they would like to see an increase. And as I mentioned, Officer Petro and Detective Richards are here today to answer any technical questions that you have about the program. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor. My concern is basically we have almost 32,000 residents, and out of 32,000, we're basing a survey off of 352 people who chose to participate. And of those 352 residents, we don't know how many were duplicate households, nor do we know if these properties abut, the metro parks, either through Bradley or um, through Mastic. So I think that this could be I think we could do better with a survey rather than relying on something like this of how many total deer have you seen on your property. Well, I mean, if you have a herd living behind your house, of course you're going to see 50 deer a day, but you might be seeing the same 5 deer 10 times that day. So it's hard to identify exactly how many deer these folks are seeing when asked these questions because we don't know. It's vague in these answers, and I think if we are relying on the 352 people that answered, then we really need to do our homework to figure out how better this can be done, because I don't think that this is a fair assessment of what our residents are looking at or what they want. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? I have one last remark, Mayor. Could we possibly start increasing the notification to more than just 5 residents? I think that the issues with Root Road and the folks that came in last week, I can't remember what street they lived on, but if we could notify the residents all around, kids like to play in woods, and I know that our officers are doing their best to put up signs and caution tape or whatever else notification they use, but kids are kids, and they're playing in the woods, and I think if we could put parents on notice more rather than just 5 resident homes, I think we could do better there as well.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. And it's just 100 deer then for 2024.
That is
Yes,
correct.
that's
And then what's happening to those deer after they're bagged and tagged? Where do they go? Are they going to the food pantry like we had planned before, or are they going to whomever picks them up?
So all of the deer are placed to residents. We've actually received several people call since the News 5 article ran. They'll call and we'll add them to a list, which basically, once we put a deer down, we'll make arrangements with whoever's on that list to come pick the deer up, and it's their responsibility to have it processed or process it themselves, however they see fit. So most of them go to residents in the city or other people in need that would like deer.
Okay. And then what happens if no one takes them? What happens to them then?
We have not come across that yet. There are, I believe, some funds set aside for us to for the city to process those deer, and then that deer meat would go to either a food bank or the food pantry.
Okay. Is it the I personally I think it's great that the residents get their choice, but I would like to see some of it going to the food pantry. I think it could be useful for some of those residents who can't pick up the deer and take care of it themselves. But I think it would be nice to stock up there for them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments? Councilman Madden?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chairman. My question, I guess, can go to Detective Richards. Is there a mechanism right now for what residents should do as far as requesting if they would like the deer meat? Should they call the police station, or where should they direct their request?
Yeah, they can call the police station. That'd be the easiest way, and everybody up front knows to put them in touch with either myself or Officer Petro, and we can get them added to the list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And one last question. How much notice is given to the residents of the culling?
So usually when we set up a stand in the area, we'll set that stand up. We'll put all our signage up. We will notify the residents in the area with the mailers, and we'll do some knock and talks if anybody's home. Otherwise, they'll get the flyers we'll put in their door. Typically, that scares the deer away when we put the stand up, if there are any in that area. So it'll usually a couple days.
So the residents, are they notified by mail, or is it just a flyer on the door?
So in areas that aren't larger, like the Root Road wooded area, we use flyers that we'll put in the door. We'll knock on the door if they're home. We'll talk to them about it. The larger areas like the Root Road area, the city sent out a letter to all those people in the area that would butt up to that property, notifying them already that we would be in there from January to March.
Oh, so they're not given a specific date or
No,
date.
because it's hard to tell where the deer will be. So we go day to day based on the food plots we put down. We check them daily to see where the deer are active. So if we give them specific dates for, say, January, and then we go over to that area and find that the food plots haven't been touched at all, we'd probably be sitting there wasting our time for that time when we can go to another area where it'd be more beneficial for us to be.
So the notice that you give to the residents, then that could be for 3 months. So they just pretty much need to be on guard or on notice for 3 months that there's going to be culling in their backyard.
So we do have some that request that we call them when we go over to that area. So we do call some daily, and we'll let the landowner where we are actually using their property know if we'll be on their property that day. As far as all the other residents in the area, it would be kind of hard to let them know every time we're in an area if we're doing 5 to each side and then several behind them. But safety is our top priority for this. So obviously, if we see any children in the backyard or people outside, which we have seen in prior times, we'll just leave and go to a different location. Obviously, us shooting a deer doesn't outweigh the safety factor. So we'd rather not shoot a deer that day or go to another location than risk something else.
No, Detective, I meant no disrespect before. I know that you guys are always very cautious and very good at what you do. So no, it's just, kids are kids and they play around. And my worry is that the parents are not notified. Um, and I know that you guys always look out for things like that, and this is what you're trained to do, and you do it well. So thank you.
No
But yeah,
problem.
mine's just my worry is just notification of the parents, really, and to the residents
Yeah.
that are surrounding properties. And maybe we do better with notifying everyone that abuts that area, and not for the officers, but the city can maybe send out notification to all the residents, um, perhaps maybe within an entire circumference of so many houses or however many homes are around the woods, um, or around the areas that you're going to be doing this.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Okay,
something we can definitely try and do.
thank you. I have no further questions. Um, I don't know if anyone else has anything else. All right. Well, seeing none, then I will close the meeting at 7:03 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Quick question. Is this speaker working? Is my microphone working now?
Now it is.
Good.
Want to say
Thank
something?
you. Nope. I just wanted the meeting was over. I wanted to see if it was working.
You were just dodging questions on that last ordinance. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I'd like to start the Building Zone Development Committee meeting at 7:03 p.m. on December 27th, 2023. This is a virtual meeting. In attendance are committee members Heeman, Limpert, and Williamson, council members Gilchrist, Glassburn, Madden, and Scarl. On the agenda is Resolution 2023-154, which is a resolution authorizing the Director of Economic and Community Development to file an application to Cuyahoga County for grant funding for planning services for mixed-use overlay zoning amendment at Great Northern Mall, and if awarded, further authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement to accept the grant funds and declaring an emergency. Ms. Director Upton, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening. This grant, every year, Cuyahoga County Planning offers a grant program, which is essentially getting their services paid for, 80% of their services paid for things like business district improvements. This particular time around, they're offering to do master planning, zoning code rewrites, things of that nature. And so we are pursuing the creation of a mixed-use zoning overlay at the mall property to kind of open up the possibilities of what could be done there. And so this grant funding will allow us to create that zoning district in and around the mall if we're awarded.
Okay. Okay. First, let the record state that the mayor, the law director, finance director, and director of economic development are also present, as well as guests. When is the application deadline?
Application deadline is January 12th, I want to say. Yeah, January 12th at 3 p.m.
Okay. And then I just wanted to get a clarification. So the grant, if we get the grant to make the analyses and assessments, do those come back to us for then the specific zoning changes that you'd
Correct.
want
So
to make?
it would follow the process that any amendment to the zoning code would be. First, it would be introduced as legislation, referred to Planning Commission for their recommendation, public hearing, committee meeting, and then ultimately adoption by City Council when the time's right.
And then do we know what the estimated amount is that it would take to do the analyses?
So each project is scoped on its individual basis when they're selected, and that's even what the county says in the grant application. But I would not expect this to cost more than $15,000 or $20,000 because it's such a narrow project.
Okay. Questions from committee? Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Director, are you saying 15 to 20,000 for the total cost of the project, or 15 to 20,000 for our portion? Because is it 80% that the county will pay and we pay the remainder?
Correct.
So our portion you're estimating is the 15 to 20,000.
I think that's absolute worst case scenario. I think we're going to be well under that, but I'd rather overestimate and have and then have to come back to this body and say, hey, no, I missed the mark on that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Limpert, may I continue? Thank you. And so the zoning overlay, a question about that rather than just changing, the entire property to be zoned as, this multi-use. What are the differences of those two options? If we were to just change the whole thing to be multi-use, or the zoning overlay does something different?
So the zoning overlay allows for additional flexibilities within the zoning code itself, so that when you're changing a zoning for a parcel, it comes with its own set of permitted uses, whether retail, office, multifamily, single family residential. A zoning overlay takes all of those permitted uses, but then adds additional flexibilities above and beyond that while retaining the rights of the property owner to use the property as it's currently zoned under its regular B3 zoning classification. That's the way that I understand and explain zoning overlays. I'm sure if I missed something within the technicalities of the law, I welcome Director Garreau, but I think I got it pretty well.
Okay, so essentially, we don't have to grant someone a privilege for a project that an overlay would provide if we don't want to. We could hold it to its original zoned purpose.
Correct. You could, but the zoning overlay, let's say someone wanted to create a multi-story, multi-use building at this point in time. The zoning overlay can look at things like parking, and a lot of you folks have heard me talk about parking, and the zoning overlay can relax parking requirements and restrictions such that you don't need, for example, 4 parking spots for every 1,000 square feet of retail. You can relax some of those restrictions that then make it cost prohibitive to do projects in tighter configurations.
And is the overlay an administrative process, or is that a planning process or a council process once that is invoked?
Well, the short answer is yes, it's all of the above. So, but as it relates to how a project comes through the pipeline, it doesn't change any of that. If it's a project that goes through the city council review process, it continues to do so. If it's a project that is an administrative process, it continues to do so. So it doesn't change any of the approval, the dance, if you will, of the approvals of an individual project.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from committee? Questions from council? Mr. Madden, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Director Upton, pardon me if I'm just not understanding how this whole process works, but is this going to involve any kind of an agreement with the mall ownership in order to do this overlay and planning?
It's not going to involve an agreement with them. I can tell you that I have had several conversations with them directly and spoken with them about this, and they are supportive of it. They think it's the right thing to do. Um, Part of what the mall, part of the challenges with the mall property itself are the way the easements between the parties work. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but the city taking this on allows for the parties to come together to ultimately hopefully do something that's beneficial for the entire property. But it doesn't require an agreement. It doesn't even require consent, frankly, but they know and are supportive of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any concerns with creating an overlay versus the zoning? I mean, what I think you laid out the flexibility and it's kind of better adapting the zoning to that specific piece of property. Is there any like drawbacks that we should be thinking about as it relates to creating an overlay versus just zoning differently?
No, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, no. I think if we were to do it the inverse, right, just to pursue a rezoning, I think there's more risk in doing that as opposed to creating the overlay. Because what the overlay is doing is saying that there's additional things that can be done and additional flexibilities. If we're just straight changing the zoning, we may be changing it to an outcome that we want to see, but it's very narrow and it doesn't create the flexibility that an overlay would.
Ms. Heeman, go ahead.
Thank you. This was actually a question, if I may, to Director Guerrero. So we have, as a council, provided a fair amount of authority to the administration with regard to, not having to come back to council or not having to go through planning for some things. Where does this overlay fit in the parameters that we've set? Because we don't really have anything like that now, right? So where does that authority fall? So somebody comes and says they want to change the parking. They'd like to relax that. Who decides that?
Well, first, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I'm back on. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the issue is that you will initially decide it in the legislation that you approve, and when you have this, you could create a particular process in the overlay district process. For instance, how you review it, what standards and criteria you expect this. Even if you're not reviewing it individually, you can build in there what the council feels is a necessary component of that particular overlay district. Whether it be setbacks and you're working with the administration as well, of course, setbacks or lot coverage or building height or what have you. So there's that is one piece of it on the front end. On the back end, these are the types of projects that aren't not gonna fall into the I wouldn't imagine into the zoning administrative review process in lieu of the planning and design commission process that's there. They don't strike me as, and maybe the director can clarify that for me. You're talking about the whole mall area and a redevelopment possibility with all sorts of different potentials. These aren't 2,500 square foot buildings and projects. This is a very large scale redo of a very large area. So council will still have a very significant role Council will have a process in designing those criteria when this zoning district is approved, and have a say then. And then in the actual plan development process and review, also will continue to play a role. Like I said, I don't know that this is going to result in these micro buildings where you're going to be able to. It's not like somebody's changing a fence or changing a building color or changing a some sort of a landscaping layout. You're talking about a significant redevelopment of multiple parcels of real estate, which it gives flexibility for. So I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good idea. We actually, overlay districts, they continue to have all the rights that they currently have, but there's some additional opportunities available. If you do a rezoning, everybody suddenly is in a grandfathered status. Anybody that tries to add on to or change, they may run into, as we rezoned down Lorraine Road previously, when we went from one zoning district to another, you run into the problem where people have one use and now it doesn't meet the code and you need variances. It just becomes unworkable. I think this just creates an opportunity for the city to better manage change as we move forward. And you have a voice. You have a voice at every step of the way.
Thank you, Director. I am in favor of it, very much in favor of it. I just want to make sure that we all understand, how we're going to lay it out. Maybe start thinking about it now, because there is a lot to think about. Like you said, it's not going to be, 2 stores, 3 stores. It certainly, I think, would be the major revamp. So thank you very much for explaining all that. Thank you.
Okay. Questions from council, committee? Okay, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to recommend Resolution 2023-154 and ask for a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. And I'll conclude the Building Zone Development Committee meeting at 7:17 p.m.
All right, I would like to call the Recreation, Public Parks and Buildings Committee to order at 7:18 p.m. Present are the mayor, the committee members, Heeman, Scarl, Limpert, council, did Mr. Broussard, he's stepped out. Council members Gilchrist, Glassburn, Madden, and Williamson. Finance director, law director is not Director Pinchuk. The economic development director, a special assistant to the mayor, and guests. First on the agenda is 2023-152, a resolution supporting the administration's request for appropriations from the state of Ohio by and through the state's capital budget for the Old Town Hall Revitalization Project, Phase 1. Mayor, who's going to speak to that, please?
Sure. I'll start off. Madam Chairwoman and Director Upton is also available for questions. This legislation and then the next piece before your committee are what the city would like to ask Representative Sweeney to fund for North Olmsted in the next capital budget. This is a unique year as the state has access to one-time funds, which allow more projects than normal to be funded. As council knows, Old Town Hall has the ability to be used for many community events, but is currently in disrepair. The administration is asking for $1 million from the state capital budget to fund work around the building. This legislation is just supporting the administration's request of the funds to show our state representative that both the administration and council support this project in order to help secure the funding. And if the project is inserted in the state capital budget, the administration would come back at that point for official authorization and appropriation of any funds from City Council.
Thank you. Should I direct my questions to you then, Mayor? Okay. So we've talked about this Old Town Hall in the past years ago, and then it would creep back into a conversation here or there. And it was, a storage facility at one point, and then it was maybe additional office space. It's been so many things. So what kind of thing are you looking toward doing, really? What are you thinking you might want to revamp it
Sure.
for.
Well, I would say that for this particular request, the what we need to address are the immediate needs of the building. So, you know, where we need to fix windows, where we need to fix a facade that's falling off, where we need to make sure that the entrances and exits are ADA accessible. Director Upton, I don't know if there's any specific like challenges that you could identify for council tonight, but that would be what we would immediately start fixing, because quite frankly the inside, you know, of Old Town Hall is I guess you would say like phase two of the project. We really need to shore up the outside. We need to make sure that the basement stops flooding. um, you know, you can't use a building that where the structure is not set first. So that would be my plan of attack, so to speak, for Old Town Hall in this set of funding.
Okay, thank you. It is it's a National Historically Registered building, so obviously I would think that it's going to be costly to do it because we are required to do it with certain materials and in certain ways. So knowing though that we would have perhaps the first million and, you know, we could do portions of it, I'm assuming, and then add on money as we would need to or you would want to. Is that the idea? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Scarl, did you have a question? Please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is for the mayor. Mayor or even Director Upton, how many phases do you anticipate? I mean, we got phase one outside, phase two is definitely going to be inside. I don't know if it needs to be sprinkled, but we need new HVAC system, all that. Is there any anticipation of more phases than one and two?
Yeah, I could take that if you'd like me to, Mayor. Through the chair to Mr. Scarl, we anticipate there would be two phases, and the part of the reason why we say it's phase one and phase two is a matter of how you go about approaching funding. So if we're successful in getting this funding and we do all of the building renovation, the tuck pointing and kind of the site work, we could come back to the state capital budget. And one of the questions that they ask is, has this project received funding before? And if we say that this is phase one, we could say, no, we're actually doing phase two of a project. So we anticipate that this project will be able to be done in two phases, provided that the full appropriation was secured through this request.
So if I'm hearing it right, if we get phase one, we go through with it and use it, we can go back to the state and ask for more grant money for phase two?
Correct. And then we don't have to tell the state that we're using this money for a project that's already gotten money. It's kind of, I guess, playing the game, if you will.
Oh, okay. One more question, if I may, please. After this is all done, say we get it all done, phase one and two, what are the plans for the old town hall? Are we going to be trying to rent that out as space for functions? Are we going to utilize it ourselves as a city only? What would be the plan?
Madam Chairwoman, to the councilman. I would say all of the above. We as a city could definitely use that space for meetings, which we already try to do a little bit here and there. Obviously, the Mayor's Art Show, which has been hosted there for many years, would be something that we would offer to the community. Things like the Dover players who used to perform there would be afforded the opportunity to come back and do community theater type productions. But to your point, we would absolutely be using that as a rental for people who are looking for space like that for events. And I mean, that could range from, you know, small wedding parties to, you know, a communion party or a graduation party or whatever, whatever our residents are, you know, looking for, because sometimes you don't need the entire community cabin to rent out, or you don't need Springvale to rent out, but you would like to have a space to rent that would be perfect in Old Town Hall.
I totally agree, and I can't wait to see this come to fruition. So thank you very much.
Are there any questions from Mr. Glassman, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just note briefly that in my previous State House experience, for this particular budget that we're applying this grant for, the kinds of projects that typically get awarded are arts and cultural facilities or facilities of historical significance. This project that we're doing, even if we don't have the absolute end use perfectly lined up for Old Town Hall, this is exactly what this budget is for. This is the kind of project that's awarded. I'll give you an example of in the near west side of Cleveland, the Variety Theater has gotten, I believe, more $750,000 from this program that still is not done and does not have an end use. So this really is, out of the assets we have as a city, the project that would be most likely to win funding for, and just shoring up the integrity of the building is really an important first step here. So I applaud the mayor and if Representative Sweeney can pull it off for going forward with this. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Limper, please.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, I know as Ms. Heeman said that Old Town Hall has been a long-standing discussion over the time we've been on council, and so you know, it's good to see that we continue to move forward on trying to renovate it. You know, it is a really unique opportunity to leverage a space that's so conveniently located from a service and safety perspective, that offers a lot of opportunities, and it would be a shame not to take advantage of that into a useful opportunity for the community. So yeah, hopefully this gets going and we're able to then get creative in using it to benefit the residents.
Thank you. I'd like to add that you know, this is exactly the kind of space that people look for: personal events, business events. It's a nice size. It's a blank canvas. Once it's, you know, sort of redone through phase 1 and 2, really, there's not a lot to prepping for a phase 3. People like to bring in their own decorations, their own things. And you see this downtown a lot in the industrial buildings and those types of buildings where it's like, here you go, here's a room and table and chairs, have at it. And they sell out. They're booked for 2-3 years. So thank you for bringing the project. I think it's going to do well, and I hope that it will get the state funding that it needs. At this time, I would like to recommend 2023-152 to all of council and ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.
You're muted, Mary Ellen. You're muted.
It's because I was talking to myself. I don't like people to know I do that, right? So I stay straight here. What am I doing? Okay. 3-0. All right. We will now be moving on to 2023-153, which is a resolution supporting the administration's request for appropriations from the state of Ohio by and through the state's capital budget for the construction of tennis and pickleball courts to be located near Springvale Golf Course. And again, Mayor or Director Upton, whoever wants to start that, please.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As City Council is aware, there is a need for outdoor tennis and pickleball courts in the city of North Olmsted. Springvale Golf Course and Ballroom has been identified as a good location for this project. The project would consist of 6 tennis courts, which could be converted into 12 pickleball courts, and additional parking connecting to the main Springvale parking lot. The city is requesting $996,608, which is the projected cost of the project from the state of Ohio capital budget. Like the previous legislation, this legislation is just supporting the administration's request of the funds to show our state representative that both the administration and council support this project in order to help secure funding. If the city does not receive the full amount requested from the state, the plan would be to look for additional grants to cover the cost. The project is scalable in that if full funding isn't received, we can complete the project in phases and complete what we have money for. And as additional funding is expanded, then we can expand the project in future phases. And once again, if the city receives the funding, the administration would be coming back to council for official authorization and appropriation of the state funds in our city budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to hold my questions for a moment if there is anything from committee. Mr. Limpert, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman Heeman. So just a couple questions. One is, as part of this budget, do we have any understanding of what the operational costs would be or maintenance of this over, extended lifetime? And I prefaced this in saying that we used to have tennis courts at the park that I used very often, that over years continued to crack and not be maintained. And while they were beneficial, if we're going to, any part of this, we're going to have to ask for, our dollars. I want to make sure that we're budgeting appropriately to not only build it, but maintain it and have it available. And, it sounds like this exciting about this is a much larger project. I'm assuming there's some opportunity there that we can potentially get rental activities or events or something that would help defer the cost. But could you speak a little bit about what that expectation is around the maintenance of these if we were to build them?
Sure. Madam Chairwoman, to the councilman, we can absolutely get you those costs from Director Pinchak. Obviously, tonight he is on vacation this week, so which is why he's not on the meeting. But we can get that to council for sure, and that is built into when this was requested to come forward. Obviously, those maintenance costs were considered within the full operation of our recreation department and being able to obviously keep up with that, because you're right. It makes no sense to put in any type of new facility or upgrade to something that we have that we're not going to be able to maintain in the long run. So.
Great. Yeah, no, it's exciting. I know we had this in the master plan for a while, and or the rec plan, I should say, and it's opportune that pickleball's now come up too, so it definitely is going to benefit a much broader base of residents. So it's great.
Mayor, if I may, when you're inquiring of the director about the maintenance, would you specifically ask, is there any portion of it that can be done by our service department, right? Because I'm looking at the materials and it looks like it's, asphalt, concrete base, blah, blah, blah. And if it's an asphalt, whether or not we can do some of that maintenance ourselves, because we've invested really in a lot of very good equipment for exactly that purpose for our streets. And perhaps that's a kind of carryover benefit. No, Mr. A girl can hope.
Absolutely.
Well, just asking. So, thank you. Are there any other questions from committee or council? No. Okay. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to recommend 2023-153 to all of council and ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes 3-0, and the meeting will conclude at 7:35 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, finance starts at 7:35 with committee members Glassburn and Limpert, council members Scarl, Heeman, Gilchrist, and Madden, mayor, directors of law, finance, and Director Upton, and the special assistant to the mayor. Two items on the agenda, dash 148 concerning a grant for wastewater, and 153 concerning an RFP for a plans examiner. Who can speak to the wastewater grant first? Mayor Jones, please.
I'll introduce, and as before, Director Upton is also available for any technical questions. As we've just talked about in the previous committee meeting, one of the focuses of my administration is to turn over every rock when it comes to funding projects in the city through outside resources. This legislation is to apply to the State of Ohio Department of Development to help fund the South Equalization Basin project. The Equalization or EQ Basin project has been in planning for a long time, for quite a few years now. As you know, costs have gone through the roof, and while the project is continuing to move forward, we're looking to find ways to get additional funding. So we are asking Mr. Chairman for a suspension on this legislation, as the deadline to apply is January 17th.
Okay. Anything further to add, Director Upton?
The only thing that I'll add is the award ceiling on this project is $5 million. It's incredibly competitive. And you know, I just don't want to set the expectation that the entirety of the EQ Basin project will be funded through this, but whatever we do get will obviously offset what the residents will then have to support with the rate structure, because as we all know, the rates were structured for a cost that doesn't exist anymore with this project. So we're trying to kind of get those numbers back as close as they can possibly be to one another. So
Understood. Construction labor and materials are pretty high, have changed a lot since 2020 and everything went crazy. Any questions from committee? Any questions from council? Mr. Scarl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Director Upton, do we know what the new total cost is? I know you said we threw out the old cost. Do we have any
So,
idea?
yes. So just kind of brief overview. We went out to bid, I believe, twice on this thing. The last time our engineer's estimate was around $9 million, and we didn't receive a single responsive bid. We received bids, but they are well in excess of the 10% cap that we couldn't award. So because of the work that our engineer, Jeff Filarski, has been doing, kind of guiding CT on a different design that accomplishes the same goal, we've been able to cut about 2.5, almost $3 million off of the probable cost. So we just, right before the Christmas holiday, we just received a memo from CT with a new opinion of probable cost. It's right around $7 million again, with a new system that Jeff has designed. So was going to save that little nugget for our budget hearings, but really kudos to Jeff, and kind of, again, fresh eyes at an old problem. He's actually designed and building one of the same type of tank in Bay Village. And so we were able to achieve that savings. So we're close to where we wanted to be 3 years ago.
Thank you.
So, Director, at a later time, maybe you can fill us more in depth about the costs and benefits, of making that change. But since this is strictly about the grant and applying for the grant, I'll leave that for a more in-depth discussion, maybe when Mr. Flarsky or others are available as well.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I will have Mr. Flash prepare a memorandum, and then I think it may be appropriate for him to come speak during the permanent budget hearings to discuss this project as well and others.
Fantastic. Are there any further questions from council? Seeing none, again, thank you for going and applying for these grants. I think we've gotten loans for projects like this before, but I don't recall getting grants. So hopefully we'll make it this time. And I will move to recommend favorably on suspension and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Limpert. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
2-0. All right, the next one on our agenda is 151, I believe, the plans examiner RFP.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this legislation is to allow the city to solicit statements of qualifications for a master plans examiner. The city is currently with CT Consultants. However, the person who is our master plans examiner with CT Consultants is leaving and starting his own firm. And CT Consultants will not be continuing to provide these services to our city or any other city. So we need to find another master plans examiner. The administration is asking to have this legislation amended as there was a mix-up in the legislation, and the city does not need to also find a building commissioner. We thankfully have one of those right now. So, and then also the legislation references a date of December 31st of 2022, and that is obviously not accurate either. So, finally, Mr. Chairman, the administration is also requesting suspension because it is important that we try to find a replacement as soon as possible. And Special Assistant Massarolo and obviously Law Director Garreau are here to answer any additional questions that council may have.
Director Garreau, did you have something you want to add?
I do, thank you, and I take responsibility for the errors in that. We two things. One, we were using a template that we had previously used when we were looking for two different positions to fill. Obviously, that's not correct. The second thing, the date is wrong. So I own that. We're running a little bit lean. We haven't had an administrative assistant in 2 weeks, so she's normally my proofreader when things go out the door. So I apologize to you, and I'll do better.
All right, well, take it under notice. Any other questions on this committee from council? Okay, then, I'm sorry, Mr. Scarl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, since we had CT was a firm that had master plans, are you looking for another firm that will offer this, or are we looking for an individual master plans examiner?
Mr.
Mr.
Massarolo?
Chairman, we're going to solicit statements of qualifications. It could be an individual. It could be another firm or company. It's really going to depend on what we get back, but we're open to either.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I would move to favorably recommend with amendments on suspension and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Limpert. All those in favor? Aye. That's 2-0. We are done with finance at 7:44. Have a happy new year, and thank you all.
Thanks.
Happy New Year.